Welcome back to the channel. Today once again we're going to look at a trapped trail arm in the downswing. So if you're a player that gets your arms stuck behind your body, I'm going to go about fixing this movement and getting more room for your arms in a pretty simple way. Hopefully you enjoy the video. Thanks once again for joining me. So diving right in here, today what we're going to focus on is the relationship between your trail elbow and your lower trail ribs here. Often what I see with players that get their arms stuck behind them in the downswing is that if you look at the reference between the elbow and the bottom ribs, is that obviously it's behind the ribs there on the way down, whereas if we're getting the arms back in front, it's getting back in front of the ribs. So I find it's a very clear visual for players to keep in mind when they're trying to get their arms back in front. We're going to go into it a little bit more detail, but before we do so, now's a great time of the season, off season here, to get clear on your game. And I'm offering a few different player development packages right now where players often fly in, spend a morning with me, spend a couple of days. We'll do the 3D, we'll do a fitness assessment if that's something that you're looking to do for your game as well, and get really clear on what you want to work on through the off season. So if that's of interest, go to ianmellorgolf.com and drop me a message there and we can tailor something for you. Okay, so today the reference between, or the relationship between, the trail elbow and the lower bottom ribs. And what I see in players that get their arms trapped behind them is that in the start of the downswing, not only is the elbow behind the rib cage, but if we pay attention to the movement of the rib cage, it's often rotated in front of the ball and they're extended through the spine. A little bit too much extended, in extension through the spine to be more clearly there. So in that position there, it's just going to be very hard to get the arms in front, and that's often going to lead to just last minute adjustments and compromising the strike. So just to go back to the start again, often these things in the transition, trying to fix them in the downswing, it's going to be pretty futile, be very hard to do. So we have to look at how the players move through backswing. And simple exercise I've got for you today is if we hold the club in one hand, now even just holding it in one hand, it might be a little bit too much weight for some people. So your other option would be to hold it this way, but holding the club in one hand and placing your lead hand on those bottom ribs, make a backswing with that backhand and just keeping that hand on those ribs. Make sure that they don't extend or elevate would be a better word to describe it, like that through backswing, because when those elevate, it compromises the structure around the trail shoulder and the trail scap, losing control of the club at the top. And you can see how that influences the trail elbow. It's somewhat falling down and behind the ribs there. So what we want to do is be able to make a backswing supporting the club in a way that's, I would say, it makes it quite intuitive with one hand in a way here, so that the elbow doesn't get too deep. So you can see there's actually a sequence to that as well. If I go to face on, I'm allowing the club head to move in a way so that I can intuitively, as I mentioned, support it here. If I was to move hands, elbow too much first, it's going to really compromise how I sit around my trail shoulder. So we're going to let the club head move quite intuitively, almost allow it just to move into a position you can really support, where the elbow is in a good position there in relation to the hands and the shoulder. And we're just going to guide those lower trail ribs around. They're going to feel very much more, when I do a good job of it there, they feel very much more like they're hugging my body, like they're sitting down, and they feel as though I can actually, a good reference is the elbow and the seam on your shirt there. In this position here, the elbow, I would say, is pretty much maybe on the seam or even keeping it in front. In front would be the goal here for someone that often gets the elbow behind the seam there. So if we can always keep the elbow in front of the seam on the way back and down, we're in a good spot. And you can see that I'm even rehearsing the down there. So really good way. And as I mentioned before, swinging it with the club head the right way sometimes can get a little bit too intense. And for the feedback that we want around the movement of the bigger segments, we might just want to go lighter so we can actually get a sense of where we want the body to be. And just holding this position here for just a couple of seconds, 10 seconds or so, even just to get a sense of what it feels like the rib cage to sit in that position, what that top of the backswing position feels like. And then even moving down into impact, allowing the arms to quite intuitively fall into that space. One thing I do like about the weights of the club here is that on the downswing becomes quite intuitive, in that I find that there's that awareness of like, oh, the club has to get into a certain position, almost move a certain amount in relation to the rib cage. And again, I'm keeping the hand there to keep the ribs hugging my body. That stops me getting to that extended position on the way down. So I'm keeping the ribs hugging the body, letting the arms move a nice distance down into a position here, and then I can even like move through there. So not one I would suggest hitting balls doing that, although you could, if you wanted to hit some really little ones. I would say maybe 10 yards would be quite difficult, I'd imagine, at first. Not something I've done myself, but let's have a go here and see how that would even work out. So I'd be here and letting the club fall and just kind of pitching it through. So yeah, not a bad one. Something you could play around with, but I think this one here very much connects with me as something you'd want to kind of do away from the ball, then kind of go in there and just kind of feel it with both hands there, just for the support on the club, and work through, and just feel so much space after doing those rehearsals there, going into the shots.